Okay. So historic houses of Jeffersontown and Middletown. So I always like interactive presentations. If I'm talking on a topic and you know anything more about it, raise your hand and I'll explain as best I can. Or at the very end, we'll take questions. I want to thank Nunnlea Historic Home here, Kathleen, who you just met, for helping us out. Jeffersontown Library, Beth Wilder, who is there. She runs the Jeffersontown Historical Museum there, which is really cool. Jack Koppel, who's with us today, and the Middletown Museum. So this was the archival locations in which we got a lot of the information you're about ready to see here. So be very careful. Be very careful. There will be refreshments served after the presentation, and donations are always welcome with these historic properties. So here we go. There are dozens of historic homes in this region. We're going to hit the highlights as such, so we're not able to talk about every one of them, or else we'd be here for another week. But so I always start out with the 1858 map of Jefferson County. Hopefully everyone's familiar with this. It's on the Library of Congress website, loc.gov. You just put in 1858 map of Jefferson County, Kentucky, and it should pop up. It's very interactive. You can zoom in and out. You can read where all these items are at. And yes, you may want to turn off your cell phones if that's possible, or put them on silent. That always helps the YouTube presentation as well. But this is very interactive. You can zoom in and out and see in very good detail where the historic homes were back in 1858. The person that did this was a guy by the name of Gustav Bergman. And I think it took him about 10 years to put this map together. He was a surveyor. God love him for doing all of this for us. We still use it. He's buried in Cave Hill Cemetery. And it's just a phenomenal resource for us historians to kind of have a snapshot where everyone lived at that particular time. And since that time, we've been able to plot and have maps that continue property changes as they went through the years. So what we'll be discussing today are the neighborhoods surrounding Nunnlea. So Nunnlea right here, and here are all the various locations we'll be focusing on. One thing I did want to start off with are the major streets through Jeffersontown. Watterson Trail, which you see here, kind of winds through the heart of Jeffersontown. Named for Henry Watterson, who was a noted Courier-Journal publisher and editor. His house was known as Mansfield. There it is. Here's a little history of Henry Watterson. So he was not originally from Louisville. He was born in Washington, D.C., moved to Nashville. He was in the Confederate Army, came to Louisville to work for the Courier newspaper, which later merged with the Courier-Journal newspaper. Then in 1894, he purchased the Joseph Pike property here in the Jeffersontown area. He built a 28-room mansion based on his wife's Nashville childhood home. Then he retired from the Courier in 1919. The property was then owned by the Watterson descendants. They even considered putting the Louisville Zoo out at his property. In 1974 or 75, there was a major fire of the mansion, and the estate was then demolished, and it's now the Watterson Woods subdivision. So there's Watterson Woods, there's Watterson Trail, Lockbridge Parkway comes through Morris Henry Drive. He was known as March Henry, that was his nickname. And Jack was just telling me that his actual address was on Morgan James Drive, so I'm not sure where that is on here. But anyways, we do know where his house once was, but it's since been demolished and now it's just this subdivision. In fact, I think this is up here now, Jack, now look at that's Morgan Jane up here. So whenever you see a photograph of Henry Watterson, he's always looking to his right. As you see there, you only see half of his face. In fact, look at this one photograph here, which is taken downtown. Everyone's looking straight, he's looking to the right. And so why is that? Well, if you read his history, he had a deformity of his right eye. He was partially blind, from what I understand. So he always wanted to put that part, he always did not want to show that part of the face. However, Jack Coppold recently sent me a photograph of a straight on of Watterson, and you can kind of see his right side of his face there and kind of see why perhaps he wanted to orientate himself in that manner. The next street I want to highlight is Blankenbaker Parkway, which again kind of winds its way through Jeffersontown, Middletown area. Where you see all those yellow stars are at on the 1858 map of Louisville, those were Blankenbaker farms. So why did they name it Blankenbaker Parkway? They own most of the property in this area, so whenever they would put a street through your property, you got to name it. So Blankenbaker, pretty obviously why such. You may also know we have a Blankenbaker Lane. That confuses those of folks who are not from this area. We natives know the difference, but others do not. But yeah, Blankenbaker Lane is named for a Blankenbaker that owned property adjacent to the Ohio River, and so that's why it's Blankenbaker Lane. And he was related to these Blankenbakers out here as well. Abraham Blankenbaker was his name. So Henry and Phoebe Blankenbaker Home, which they built in the early 1800s, was located right here. There's Blankenbaker Parkway that cuts through. So the Blankenbakers came to America in 1717 from the Germany area. It was probably known as Bavaria or another name back then. But anyways, they came here in 1717, went to Williamsburg, Virginia. Their descendants were noted to be on the tax rolls in 1797. And Henry Blankenbaker owned 250 acres of land in this area. He built this log cabin that you see here. It was restored by Elmer and Sandra Blackburn back in the 1980s. That's Elmer and Sandra there. This is a 1990 Courier article on them. And so Blankenbaker built a log cabin, and then the Blackburns added on this masonry addition to it. There's another Blankenbaker historic home. It's actually almost in the heart of Jeffersontown. It's on Watterson Trail. It's Dr. Luther Blankenbaker. And there's the history of it there. He was a town trustee and all. He was in the Blankenbaker family up until the early 1980s. And it still exists. It's still being used. So those are the major streets, Watterson Trail and Blankenbaker Parkway. I wanted to highlight those to start out with. So let's kind of go around. We're going to go out a little bit and then come on. We'll end here at Nunnlea at the end of the presentation, but we'll start on the outskirts and talk about Anchorage and how Anchorage got its name. James Gosling was a retired riverboat captain, and he built this Gothic Revival house in 1868, right after the Civil War. And as a tribute to his neighbor was a guy by the name of Edward Dorsey Hobbs. By the way, I left off the R, that's a typo. It's Dorsey, not Dosey. Dorsey Hobbs. So Hobbs placed an anchor on the train station to honor his good friend James Gosling, because James Gosling was a riverboat captain, so he put the anchor there at the train station. That's how the Anchorage name came about. As a very ironic twist to all of this, Gosling was killed at that train station when he slipped and fell and went under a train. So very tragic end to Mr. Gosling, but we still recall him with the Anchorage name. That house has since been greatly restored. Here's the interior of it now. I think the former Governor Matt Bevin, he lived here just recently. So here it was before the restoration. What it looks like today. Did a very good job of it. So let's go to Middletown. So there's an aerial view of what Middletown looks like today. The heart of Middletown is right through here. Shelbyville Road kind of takes a detour around the heart of it there. Blankenbaker Lane comes in down lower here. Parkway, sorry. Here's a 1962 aerial view of the same. It's kind of grown a bit. We got more trees, don't we? Looks like. Here's the 1858 map of Middletown. Middletown there. You got Shelbyville Pike coming through here. It kind of meanders through. I really love this map here. It's a 1797 map of Middletown, and it's displayed at the Middletown Museum if you want to go and look at it a little bit closer. But it lists where all the residents live in this area, who owned what farms and where. One of the historic homes was Joshua Fry Lawrence House, which is this here. That's Joshua Fry Lawrence there. Look at this interior photograph of that. How would you like to light all of those candles on that chandelier? I think you'd burn the house down, which may have happened. I don't know. It's no longer there. But yeah, the house has since been demolished. But on this 1858 map, it indicates where the Lawrence home was located, just outside Middletown. And then on this 1797 map, shows where the Lawrence farm was back in those days. I love these maps at the Middletown Museum. If you really want to find out more about the historic homes, you got to check out the museum. They have a number of these illustrations of the historic houses in that area. I wish Jeffersontown would do something like this. Here's a better example of it. Just great. And Jack, I'm not sure we've gone through all these to correct a lot of the errors that we since have. As we went through a lot of these historical things, we were constantly tweaking some of the history of these. So we'll start off with this home here, which is currently the Middletown City Hall. It was formerly the Davis Tavern and the William White House. So here's a little bit of the history of that. William White was a surveyor, I would think, who platted Middletown, started things. Then his son-in-law took it over. Then Susan Davis occupied it, turned it into a tavern. The Leatherman family occupied it as well. And folklore suggests that it had some distinguished visitors like Marquis de Lafayette and Henry Clay, but take that with a grain of salt. We have yet to verify whether or not that happened. And as Jack has pointed out, in 1825, when the Marquis de Lafayette was here, it was not a tavern. It was still a stagecoach stop. So who knows if that's true or not. But now it's the Middletown City Hall. And there's some beautiful illustrations of it there at the Middletown Museum. Across the street is another house that served as the kitchen to the, what's now the City Hall, was the Tavern, the Davis Tavern. But this served as their cooking location. It's since been altered, but they put, as you may know, back in those days, they always put the kitchen where they cooked things away from the main house so they didn't burn the house down. And so that was put a good distance away. This is the former house of the Governor Lawrence Weatherby. I think, other than, I guess Matt Bevin would be a governor from Louisville, but up until that point, Weatherby was the only governor from Jefferson County. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think Weatherby was the only governor from Jefferson County up until recently. And I don't even think if Bevin was born here either. So,
no, but our present governor was born
Steve
in
Beshear.
Yeah, well, not Steve. Andy.
Andy Beshear. Was
Yeah.
he born in Jefferson County?
In Louisville, yes.
In Louisville. Okay, so we got more than that. So Lawrence Weatherby was definitely the first. And there's his house, which unfortunately no longer exists. This church building and property, even if you Googled that 11504 Main Street, that number no longer exists. And I think we feel it was more over to this area here. This is 11508. But anyways, that unfortunately the house no longer is there. Here are some more highlights about Lawrence Weatherby. He, during his governorship, the Kentucky Turnpike, which is now I-65, was started and constructed, and the Kentucky Fair and Exposition Center was implemented. Another historic home, which they think might be the oldest structure in Middletown, is this one here, the Bayenroth House, if I said that correct. Bayenroth. And a little bit about the history there. It was actually built by a guy by the name of Michael Grimley. John Marshall then owned it, and the Bayenroths owned it in the mid-1800s. And you'll keep seeing different spellings of the Weatherby family. Here's another name for them. This is the Tarbell House. It was just off Shelbyville Road near Blankenbaker. So the log cabin, which was right there, part of the original house, the log cabin was saved. There it is being moved. And there it is today as part of the Vieira Apartment Clubhouse. I've not been back into the Vieira apartment area there, but I take it it's still there. It's on their website, so I take it it's still there. But anyways, you can kind of get a feeling for where that's at. The Benjamin Head House there, near the heart of Middletown, built around 1804. Well, that's when Benjamin Head came here. He was a town trustee. He operated a general store. More of the history there. One of the key things that happened here was Dr. Silas Weatherby had his physician office there. And here's a good example. That's the head house behind him there. And I take it one of these is Dr. Weatherby. They were having some major epidemic called the hookworm disease. I'm not sure if anyone's ever heard of that before, but I had to Google it to find, don't read this. But yeah, they had some sort of disease going around and everyone had to go and get their vaccine or indoctrinated infection from that. Here are some more pictures of the head house. It had a porch on it at one time. Then Benjamin Head sold that house and moved west, and he bought a big farm. And then his grandson eventually inherited it, Robert Tway, T-W-A, and he had a dairy there, and that soon became the Plainview neighborhood area. So this is the Plainview Clubhouse. There's a big swimming pool not very far from this, and so it's still there. It's called the Tway House, but it was connected to Benjamin Head from the head house there in Middletown. The Abel House, also in Middletown. See a little bit of history there. Joseph Abel bought 600 acres for $1,100 in 1803. I don't know if this is right or not. It would seem like it would be more than that, but I had it listed for $30,000 in 2025. You think you buy 600 acres now and for that amount of money? I probably need to redo that. I don't think it's much higher than that amount. Anyway, it's a very beautiful home, still there. And folklore says that there's a ghost there protecting the buried treasure. And some of the Abel descendants became physicians. And Helen Abel, did anyone know Helen Abel? Very prominent preservationist here back in the 60s and 70s of Louisville. And she was the wife of Irvin Abel Jr., who owned that house. So Helen, I knew Helen back in the day. Greek Revival Home by William Bull. Also connected to the Abel folks there. Beautiful little house, still there, Greek Revival. So here's an interesting home. This is the Henry Frank home. He built his residence of reinforced concrete. He wanted to make it fireproof. He was a contractor, so he knew what he was doing with all of that. And it said that this house was designed by noted Louisville architect Arthur Loomis. And I'm a very well astute student of Arthur Loomis' design, so I'll let you all decide whether or not Loomis built this house. I'll let you all make the... So, did Loomis actually design this house? Let's see. Here are some Loomis homes that Loomis designed. What do you think?
No.
So, but that's not it. You know, it still could be. So the next test I look for is the stairwells, because whenever you look at a Loomis design, he loved his stairwells. He spent a lot of time detailing them. designing them, beautiful stairwells. They were a work of art. By the way, here's that one there, so you can kind of get a feel for how different it was. So here's the stairwells that Loomis designed. See, very artistic. There's a stairwell for the Frank house. What do you think? So there's here's one more Loomis stairwell. This was in the Frank house. This is a Loomis stairwell. And this one's over in Anchorage. So I'm kind of not quite there. Now, maybe Loomis worked with Henry Frank on some projects, but I would need to have a lot more. I would like to see some hard evidence that he designed this house before I would say it was wrong. But anyways, it doesn't have any of the characteristics of a Loomis design. John Womack House, which was over here off Shelbyville Road. James Douglas bought the Womack House and altered it and expanded it. Douglas had a farm there in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Slave quarters were there. And there was a racetrack. And it's the Douglas Park racetrack, but it is, to my knowledge, it was there off of, in the Beachmont neighborhood in South Louisville, the track itself. But anyways, Douglas owned the racetrack. But you can see where Womack's house was, or the Douglas house, in relationship to Shelbyville Road. It was pretty much right across from where the Forum Senior Living Facility is today. Now then, neat old log cabin. I love when we say old log cabins. Built about 1826 by a blacksmith. They date it based on the Roman numerals carved on the log house. Put some clapboard on it. It still exists, but more than likely you have driven by this log cabin and not noticed it. Why would you not notice it? There you go. There it is. Here's what's next to it. The context has somewhat changed over the last 200 some odd years. I love this little house here. It's an Italianate home. It's also, I think, a Leatherman house. Yeah, Leatherman. It's right off Watterson Trail and Tellersville Road, just off a block off Watterson Trail. I love the bracketed eaves here and the elongated windows. Conrad Seton House. It's on Watterson Trail, very prominent home on Watterson Trail and in Jeffersontown. The Valentine Conrad Pottery, a lot of people are familiar with this. So here's the history of all of that and about his unique form of pottery, which I understand through archaeology. Whenever the archaeology folks are digging around Jefferson County, you're always coming across this pottery. It was sold throughout the region here. So it's very famous. Talking about Conrad there. And then Seton came along and that's how his name got involved with it. So when Conrad got rid of this house, he built this. It's called the Valentine Conrad Drabble House, or also known as Diamond Fruit Farm. And it still exists, although you would probably never know it if you drove by it. Because here's where it's at. Here's Firstburn Parkway. 6 Mile Lane is down here. Raintree Drive, it's way back in here. Still there, but very much surrounded. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. This is some of the information about it. Talking about the history of it, where you got all the land from, and also I love the National Register, and you can always pull these up on the historic homes, and I'm sure Nunnlea probably has that. It's out there on the internet if you want to Google that. The archaeology that has been done here, what they found on it. So, the Tucker House. Hazel and Nancy Tucker House. It's on Tucker Station Road. right there. Blankenbaker Parkway is winding through over here, Watterson Trail. This is it today. It's a bed and breakfast. Some of you may know the attorney Steve Porter, who's very much involved in historic preservation. He owns this. It's beautiful. You can go up and knock on the door, and I'm sure if Steve's home, he'll let you in and take a look. It's a beautiful home. 50 acres is when the Tuckers got it, and some of their history that I got off the National Register format. So, why is it called Tucker Station Road? Reason, there was a railroad station called Tucker Station, and I've looked for photographs of it, and thus far we've not been able to locate it, but there's a railroad that runs not too far from it, and it said that the Tuckers got the farm so that it was close to the railroad so that they can ship whatever produce or whatever they grew at the farm into town. So there was a Tucker Station depot, and thus far I know was there a Jeffersontown depot? Does it still exist, or is that since gone? I take it. I don't know if the depot here for that Henry Watterson would have taken.
There's a big, large sign that says Jeffersontown from the depot, you know,
Yeah.
but I don't know if I don't think that's.
Yeah, we don't think the depot still exists. As you may know, Henry Watterson, to get to the Courier Journal where he worked, he would ride his horse carriage to the train station and take the interurban into town. So that's what he did. But anyways, these old depots, I know Buchel neighborhood area just restored their old depot. Blackacre, it's the Tyler farm, and it's still with us, and a beautiful home and homestead. Talking about it there. Moses Tyler, who came here. Settled within the Floyd's Fork area, it says, and the farmstead and all, they're still there. We're glad that the Blackacre farm pretty much still exists to show what life was back in those days. There you go. What life was once like. We've come a long way since then, I think. The Edward Tyler House, which is out off Tellersville Road. It just was recently beautifully restored. And so this is it here. Nunnlea is way up there on Hurstburn Parkway, Tellersville Road. Here's the Gene Snyder Freeway. You kind of get an idea of where all that is located. Blackacre is just above it there. Here's some interior photographs of that Tyler house. It's now, they call it Rockdale now. I'm not sure why they call it Rockdale, but anyways. So just behind where we're seated today is a place called Oxmoor. This was the land that the Bullitt family owned back in 1858 on the map. You can see it there. And the way down here, just here, is Peter Funk. We'll get to Peter Funk here in just a few minutes. But the Oxmoor family, the Bullitt family owned that and still own most of this land. Believe it or not, the Bullitt family still owns most of the land that you see here. There's Oxmoor House itself. Very few folks get to see the house. It's now managed by the Filson Historical Society. And they have several events upcoming at this house, which are for free. So if you just get on the Filson Historical website, you can see what events are upcoming if you want to go out and see this home. It's beautiful, but they keep it locked down. You can't get, they got gates on the street leading to it that you cannot get into without going to an event. So here's the lineage here. Alexander Bullitt is the one that built the home. He was married first to Priscilla, then married Churchill Prather. The Bullitt family is the one that's known as Bullitt County, so that's a connection there. There it is, it's beautiful. It's been expanded many times. It has the largest private library in the state of Kentucky. I believe over 10,000 volumes are in there, and that's where the Filson does their lectures. So if you want to go out there and see those, that's where it would be.
They do have their own bourbon now.
Oh, okay.
Bourbon, so you can go.
So do they grow their own wheat, or is it just a name, or is it someone else bottling it?
Well, I think it's a mixture.
Okay, but yeah, I have seen that they're doing bourbon tours and all out there with the home.
And it's neat on those bookcases, like one of them's a door, is a secret door to go into the house.
Oh, it's beautiful, it's phenomenal. So that's Oxmoor, and they still own most of the land. The Bullitt family does, not so much the Filson, but the Bullitt family. Oxmoor Mall, I understand, is still owned. The land underneath of it is owned by the Bullitts. That is correct. The Bullitt family did it right back in those days. Right adjacent to them is the Jacob family farm. Charles Jacob was a mayor of Louisville. Anyway, one of his relations there owned Linford, which is now the clubhouse for the Hurstburn Golf Club. And I always like to give Andrew Jackson Downing for credit for the design of the Hurstburn Country Clubhouse, the Linford here. Andrew Jackson Downing produced a pattern book that he sold throughout the United States. Anchorage, that you saw at the very beginning, is another one of Andrew Jackson Downing homes. Whenever you see those elaborate, nice carpenter Gothic, very stylish homes way out in the wilderness, the rural area, well, who designed those? Well, they didn't have any architects out in those areas, obviously. What they did, they bought pattern books created by people like Andrew Jackson Downing, and they went to their local builder and said, I want that house, and the builder would build it. And so that's how these homes got to be built. By the way, Andrew Jackson Downing, if he had lived, he was only 37 years old when he died, but if he had lived, you would know who he was to this day, because you know who his business partner is to this day. His business partner was a guy by the name of Frederick Law Olmsted. Downing was the one that came up with the concept for Central Park. Had it all planned out, what to do with it, all that. It was his idea. When Downing drowned in a horrible boating accident off Baltimore Harbor, Olmsted came to the rescue, and now we know who Olmsted is. But anyways, it was Downing's idea to do Central Park. And then, of course, just down the street from us here, just a couple of blocks, is Richard Anderson, a soldier's retreat home there off Seton Springs Parkway, off Hurstburn Parkway. This house has been restored. It's had all sorts of calamity associated with it, fires, possible earthquakes. You never know what all damaged it, but Leroy Highball purchased it back in the, I want to say, 70s or 80s and rebuilt it. Of course, he helped develop Hurstburn area as well. And in the basement of this home, the current owner has done this beautiful museum in the lower level that he does open up to the public. It's very small, so but if you went up and knocked on his door, he'd probably let you go in and see it. He's very proud of it. I've been there, and it's wonderful. It talks all about the Anderson family. There's some of the interiors of it now. And one of the descendants of Anderson was Robert Anderson. He was the hero at Fort Sumter back when the Confederates bombed Fort Sumter. And Robert Anderson, again, was born just a couple blocks from here. He's buried up at the West Point. That's his gravesite there. He's buried right next to George Custer with a little bighorn. Kind of interesting. When I went to see his, by the way, when I first went to find his gravesite, I went to Arlington, thinking he's buried at Arlington, right? And the guy at the desk, and when I say where's Robert Anderson buried, which of the 300 Robert Andersons that we have buried here can you find? So then I since found he was at West Point and went up there. But yeah, George Custer is buried just over here to the side, which I find very interesting. So let's talk about the Funk family while we're here today. Jacob Funk owned a farm just north of Middletown area here. Is that Middletown map again, 1797. Jacob Funk is listed owning a farm there. Says he settled here about 1792. He died in, 1794, so he wasn't a resident here very long. His son John inherited 600 acres of the land. Then another descendant, Peter Funk, owned the land right here at Tillersville Road and Hurstburn Parkway. So here's a whole story about the Funk family homes that we have around us here today. The Peter Funk home is right across the street from us here. It's now stone. It was originally brick, and we'll get into that in just a second as to how they put the stone on there. Of course, we have Nunnlea, which wasn't called Nunnlea. It was a Funk, Harriet Funk, I believe, right, that married Heiss and owned this house. And then across the street's another Funk house across the way, which was known as Stony Brook. So here's where they are all at. So Nunnlea is where we're at today. The James Funk house back over there. And then this one here, the Peter Funk house right there. That's what the Peter Funk house looks like today. Yeah. It was very similar in design to Soldier's Retreat and to Locust Grove.
Why did they put all the stone around?
Okay, well, we'll get to that in just a second. So here's the home, and here's some of the historical information about it. It says it was built around 1795. By the way, the Funk family cemetery, if I can go back to it, let's see, where's that map at? Here it is. Funk family cemetery is right over here, and you have to get to it off Taylorsville Road. There's another street that comes in here into this neighborhood, and the Funk family cemetery is right back in that location there. So here's why they put stone on it. There's a major lawsuit over it as well. So it was a car dealership that owned the property there, and for whatever reason, they thought it looked better in stone than brick. Not sure if they had any moisture issues. Maybe that was the reason why they wanted to replat it. But when they did it, a lot of the people in the area got very upset with them over it. And so they filed, I'm not sure if it was filed a lawsuit or what, but there was some legal action taken against those owners. And so they had to, what their compensation was to get out of this sort of situation was to restore the spring house, which is right there. There's the spring house, so you'll hopefully see that when you depart here today. You can see it off of Hurstburn Parkway, but it's out in the middle of the parking lot. But that was their answer to their situation, their remedy for stoning the house. It had a fire about 2 years ago. There's smoke coming out of it. And so the last time I was there, it was boarded up like you see here. I'm not sure if it's still boarded up or not, or if they've done any renovation. I don't think they have. This was about a year ago that I took this photograph.
We heard that we wanted it to look more like a chateau.
Oh, more like a chateau. A very historic chateau, I guess. So here's the James Funk home, which is right across the street from us here. That's what it looks like today. It's a State Farm insurance office, but I'm glad it's still there. I think it's an Italianate design. Again, it's got bracketed eaves and the elongated windows. Whenever you see elongated windows, it looks like an I for Italianate. That's the way and then the bracketed eaves are also part of the architectural style. And they wanted to demolish this as well. We horrible preservationists said, no, you can't demolish it. So we had it moved. So it's back behind the jewelry store, which is on the corner now. This used to be on the corner, the Funk house used to be, but jewelers wanted to be on the corner, so we moved it back.
We were asked if we wanted it, they would want to bring it over on our
Where they were going to want to put it on this property? Oh my gosh, yeah, that would have been
So we
interesting.
picked the ice house, but they didn't want to fix that.
Yeah, that ice house is really cool. There you can see it off to the side, that round building there. And so we end up here with the Nunnlea Peter Funk built this for his daughter Harriet as a wedding gift. It's known as Willowbrook. I don't know if you ever want to go back to that name or not, but it's been known as Nunnlea for a long time, since what, the early 1930s when the Edie family purchased it. And you can see how the name came about there. And the president, now the former president, Herbert Hoover, he was not president when he came here, right? Was it before or after his presidency, do you know? After? Okay. But anyways, beautiful. And there's slave quarters, my understanding, behind here, and the police department is located there, so there's a thing of slave quarters, which are right behind. Police department's there, and then Nunnlea. We should still own some of this property here, I would think.
We've got 2 acres.
2 acres, well, that's more than what some have. And so, just to let we give you a little tease beforehand, on October the 19th at 3 p.m. I take it, we're going to be doing a Haunted Houses of Louisville presentation here. You may say, is this house haunted? We'll come and find out.
I'm not gonna say it.
We're not going to say anything more. But anyways, make sure you're signed up on the sign-up sheet to get an email about this as we go forward with it. If you're interested in any of the books, I got them up front here. If you want to join the Louisville Historical League, you're welcome to do so for free. And refreshments are being served right after this presentation, and donations are welcome. So there you go. Thanks for attending. I hope you learned a lot about historic homes here. Yes, question up front.
Well, I was going to ask about, I think you had a picture of it up there. There's that house in Jeffersontown where you go out the back of the county clerk's office and there's a little, alley. And then you get down to the alley and there's that house, I think, is right across from there.
College Avenue.
Yeah, I didn't know what
I
the
always
street
like
was.
that house.
I always have,
Is that the
every time I
Leatherman
go,
house?
get
Is
my
it
The
little.
Italian house that you showed.
Yeah, that would
Yeah.
be the Leatherman house, yes.
I thought you said 11.
Yeah,
So that would have
11.
been built when, is that?
I'd have to go back and look and
Like
see.
1810 or something like that, that's.
Well, Italian age, so you're talking around the 1860s or so.
Oh,
for that
really?
house.
I was thinking.
I'd have to look and see, but
Yeah, those
yeah.
one-story things I always
You know, it's a
think
beautiful
of.
home.
Yeah.
Although I understand ivy is growing all over it now, from what I've heard.
Let's see.
I'm not sure if that's the case or not.
Is that bad?
That's what I've not been by to see.
The other question I had was that house that's near Hikes Point on Taylorsville Road. Cedar something maybe?
Hikes Point.
Yeah, on Taylorsville Road. And-
Wait, to before you.
Yes.
And it's before you
Yeah.
come to me.
It's Cedar Grove or something like that.
They came here once and chatted with us a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
but I see, I live
yes.
almost really close
It's
to.
probably outside my scope, so I'm not too familiar with it.
Sorry.
But I'm sure I would know what it is if I saw a photo of it. But yeah, there's Jefferson County back in the late 1990s did a nice book on historic properties in Jefferson County, and homes like that would be in that book. So, and I used some of their photographs within my presentation. But anyways, sorry, don't quite know. But if it's near, was it on Hikes Lane or Hikes Point?
It's right at Taylorsville and McMahon.
Uh-huh.
As you're coming from J-Town into Hikes Point, it's on the left.
On the left,
And
yeah.
it sits back, it has a
This
big
is back, there's big trees
field
around
around it.
it.
It's lovely. I can't remember the
It's
name.
near TJ.
Okay, I'll have to look at it.
There's that other one on Hikes Lane, the Hunsinger Hikes house. On Hikes Lane, the curve.
There are like 5 Hikes homes still around.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there were 5, now there's 4. One was the old John E's,
They tore it down.
they tore it down. And we learned that it was a log house when they were tearing it down.
It's gone. It's
Wow.
overnight.
I grew up on Glenmead, which runs, it's right next to the house, the Hunts. And the woman who lived there at the time, was Aunt Judy Hunsinger, lived there at the time. And I don't know who owns it now. I'm so glad that's still there.
Yeah, if anyone needs to depart or go back and get some refreshments, feel free to do so.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want to hold everyone here in,
There's a picture out in the hallway when the Huntsingers lived here.
Oh,